The next item is approval of the Rule 45 reports for May and June. Can I get a motion to approve? Moved by Alderman Knudsen, hearing no objections, so ordered. The sole subject matter today of the hearing is Resolution 19950, creation of a Chicago Cook County Task Force to reduce violence against women. We have a number of expert witnesses here to testify and to introduce the subject matter. The chair recognizes Alderwoman Tabares.
Thank you, Chairman Hopkins. I just want to thank you for your support. Today, we're going to be making a presentation on the recommendations to the task force, and I want to especially recognize my co-chair of the task force on the county side, Cook County Commissioner Donna Miller, who is here with us. So I want to thank her for all of her support too. I do have a closing statement. I can close, and you're okay to close too. Okay. And I also, we also have, you heard from public comment from Alderwoman Monet Wilson too, from Calumet City. So, and then we have Commissioner Stamps as well, who's here too. Thank you.
Please add Alderman Vasquez to the attendance roll call. Commissioner Miller, did you have an opening statement? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, call the first witness.
Hi, good morning. My name is Katie Dunn. I'm from Chicago 77 Group, and I am here with Sarah Brown and Carmen Navarro-Jacone, and then two other special guests that I will let them introduce themselves.
Kelly Costello from Impact Partners.
And John Buckley, the Practice Director of PPL Midwest.
So first, we want to thank Chairman Hopkins. Thank you for all your support and for bringing us all here today. And then especially to our two co-chairs. It's been such an honor to work with you both. These are two women that work so hard for their communities every day. And so to take this on with us was a huge undertaking, and it was nights and weekends, and we cannot thank you enough. We really look forward to the work ahead. Today, we're going to be presenting the findings of 6 months of work. This was 6 months of the city agencies, the county agencies, and then also some state agencies that joined us as well. This was a first of its kind effort, as Commissioner Miller has said before, believe it or not. It's the first time all these agencies came together in this capacity. And really, the primary focus was to look at violence against women. That's a broad category, but victimizations against women were on the rise. And were really a symptom of a broken system overall. And so what we did was bring together an executive committee chaired by 4 of the aldermen, Alderman Tabares, obviously, Alderman Lee, Alderwoman Nugent, and Alderwoman Monique Scott. And then on the county side, we had support from Commissioners Anaya, Gaynor, and Degnan, along with our co-chair, Commissioner Miller. And so that executive committee held monthly meetings. We brought in experts from across the country. And so today we're just going to present some of the findings from those discussions, from hundreds of other discussions with city, state, and county agencies, frontline workers, and then also the advocacy and service provider community. So when we came to you just a few short months ago, things were very dire. Illinois' per capita rate caused by death of an intimate partner was the combined rate of New York, the states of New York and California. The city of Chicago, which has the violence reduction dashboard from the University of Chicago, by the end of 2025, domestic related fatal shootings had increased by 56%. In 2025, domestic victims in cases were 75% Black residents, 17% Hispanic Latino, which equates to 92% homicide victims in domestic cases. The Inspector General also reports that there were 336 calls a day just to the Chicago Police Department that were categorized as domestic, which did not capture other calls that would have been domestic when the officers responded. So just to also add, the murder rate had increased by 27%. So after conversations and input, most importantly from victims and survivors, we decided to initiate the City of Chicago Cook County Violence Against Women Task Force. This is truly a whole government approach. And throughout this journey, survivors were leading these efforts. And I truly spent many, many years in the county and city before this, and Carmen has 30 years in the county, and so many of the other partners have been around for a while. No one could remember a survivor-led effort. And so bringing their voices to the forefront was an honor. And also, Sarah will speak in a little bit, but just we want to thank Sarah Brown, who really, truly was just a heroine throughout this whole effort. So many survivors do not feel safe coming forward. And so her voice has really been, she's amplifying the voices of so many people we've talked to and so many people that I know are supporting these efforts and will be going forward. So there's a pretty famous book out right now. It's by a journalist. She just was on Oprah's bestseller, and it's New York Times bestseller. But what she did was spend years researching domestic violence across the country. And basically, in summary, her quote is, "If I had to whittle down the changing world of domestic violence to just one idea that made all the difference, it would be communication across bureaucracies, certainly, but also across political ideologies and programs, people and systems and disciplines." That summary really states what was missing in the city of Chicago and Cook County and really throughout Illinois. So the progress that has been made, we're here today at these final hearings after truly about a year of work, 6 months officially of this task force. And so we do want to share that, this has been a lot of work, and there's so many people that have helped. And putting pressure on the system and really looking at the system holistically, there's a lot more work to do. But as we sit here today, domestic violence murders have decreased by 53%. Using the same statistics, the same dashboard that I shared previously. So the governor partners span across the state, the county, the city of Chicago departments, and then including Alderman Monet Wilson's efforts, we are now going government by government in some of these south suburbs that have also been overlooked and under-resourced for really a very long time. I do just want to share one caveat is that we don't have Cook County data yet, which is one of the main recommendations of this report. So we have some brilliant partners that have been helping us along the way. The University of Chicago's Crime Lab provided support to initiate this task force, Northwestern as well, and then the Public Policy Lab and Impact Partners. And then finally, the All In Alliance, which is going to be led by Sarah, and it's a new effort that we're launching to go community by community to hear from survivors. So just to get to the system, the system that women go into is unlike any other government system. So there's absolutely no one in charge. There's no coordination. And you get bounced back and forth between different court divisions, court systems, like civil system, criminal system. And also there's 3 different levels of government, the city, local, county, and state, who have distinct statutory obligations in this system. They may oversee a different database, like the LEAD system with state police or the FOID card system. They may be the civil court. And then also the Chicago Police Department, which is truly the front lines. So dissimilar to the criminal justice system or one of the other government systems, someone walking in the door can span across multiple departments, multiple agencies, and truly there's policies and laws right now that impede data sharing between those agencies that limit any coordination. And so truly that lack of understanding of the system has created just a culture of confusion. not just for the victims walking in the door, but for everyone in the system. Every courthouse is its own entity. It's every courthouse has different resources, different organizations as partners. It's a really complex system. And because of this culture and confusion and lack of data, the entities that are providing the services, housing and advocacy, unfortunately are in a fight every single year for funding. There's no dedicated streams, funding streams on either side. And every year they're made to make the case for funding against all odds. And so we want to acknowledge them, and then also that hopefully all of these efforts will help improve the ability to get some funding to expand resources that are desperately needed in all of our communities, especially the south suburbs, from what we've identified. So the principal goals were to create a unified system. That is something that will not happen overnight. There's legislation that needs to take place. Sorry, I'll just wait. But there's legislation that needs to take place. Okay, I can catch up here. No, I really am showing my age. Sorry, this is not going forward. Oh, okay. So I'll just keep talking. So the principal goals are to create a unified victim center system that protects victims. We've laid out recommendations on how to begin that approach. The report that was generated and circulated, extensively lays out what we feel would be the executive recommendations, but also really the recommendations by each department to improve the capabilities to be able to provide this unified system. The other principal goal is to improve the first responder safety and health. Every single aspect of the court system impacts the frontline people that are responding to calls. From all of the city agencies, but really all of the law enforcement and first responder agencies throughout Cook County. So we'll get to some of the issues that have been impacting their safety in a moment. And then finally, to reduce violent crimes and victimizations, which we are on off to a great start, but there's so much more work to do. So the executive committee, as I mentioned, was chaired by our incredible leaders, Commissioner Miller and Alderman Tabares. The executive committee met monthly at the Cook County boardroom. And it was really a space to bring in outside voices and then also hear from the agencies that are doing the work here in Chicago and Cook County. And so we really want to thank so many of the agencies that came and participated and presented. And then obviously our partners from across the country that came in or participated or just offered us insight as we were building out the curriculum for that. In addition, there were 6 working groups that are the original focus areas. The high priority court orders, data and research, court systems and programs, first responder safety and health, training policies, and the path to survivorhood. Those are really the targets, the initial targets, because those were the focus areas that we identified where there was the most concern and really the areas where we needed to have conversation to initiate these findings. The overarching concern, we'd love to be here today to present more information and new data and have more information about Cook County as a whole. But unfortunately, we still are facing some limitations from the court system data. And so there's been a lot of different people working on that, and we're going to continue to pursue those efforts. Alderman Tabares recently held a hearing. Commissioner Miller recently held a hearing requesting more data that would have supported these efforts and these reports. And so we move forward kind of with the caveat of this is the report that was issued is a live document, and it's a living document that will be updated as we get more information. But truly, the Cook County court system is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So what happens right now is you could, if you're a journalist or you're a researcher or you're someone in public policy, or you're a leader, you put in a request to the Office of the Chief Judge. And if he approves it, then it goes to the clerk, and then you may or may not get it. And so that process is just not working, and it's not functioning. It's limiting grant dollars, it's creating chaos and confusion, and it's impeding the efforts to unify the system. And so the need for transparency is going to be a theme throughout these recommendations, and really how we can initiate some kind of quick fixes and get information out to the public. So the court system, when I say it's not subject to FOIA, this is what it includes. So the entire criminal court system, the entire civil court system, pretrial release, which manages tens of thousands of defendants every year, the Office of Probation and Parole, orders to parole, also tens of thousands of individuals every year, GPS monitoring, which is, there's 3 different programs under the Office of the Chief Judge, and then one that's tapering down under the sheriff, and then really all of the other specialty programs. And so to get any kind of information is really at the discretion of the system holders, and currently they're not beholden to the public to share that information. So that brings us to executive recommendation number 1, which is to legislate transparency. And so our first and foremost recommendation is to work with our legislative teams to incorporate the Cook County court system and all of its programs into compliance with FOIA. The next working group and also point of focus is high priority orders. That was a term that we defined in our working group and in these efforts as including protective orders, arrest warrants, and then firearm enforcement orders. And so these directly impact victims and victimization and the safety of first responders and everyone in our community. And so just to kind of give a preview of what a protective order means, it's a domestic violence order of protection. So an emergency order of protection, someone walking into a courthouse and seeking that assurance from the court system that they can get an order of protection served that limits the communication and even provides other remedies to what's called the respondent, which would be their abuser. And that offers immediate protections to someone who's in a state of crisis. There's also stalking no contact orders, civil no contact orders, firearm restraining orders, which is just grossly underused throughout Illinois, and then the workplace protection restraining orders, which are also really important and are rarely, if ever, initiated in Cook County. So then once you get an order of protection, there's 3 different types. So you can be given an emergency order by a judge, but that has to be served, and then there has to be a hearing. A judge can issue an interim order as cases proceed and the victim has to come to court over and over and over again. And then really the end goal is a plenary order, which offers up to 2 years of protection. So if this data is correct, in 2024, less than 15% of cases that were initiated ever received that plenary order. And so we know that the system right now is just not working. The main component would be the lack of service. And so CBS did an amazing analysis a couple years ago using, I believe, 10 years of data from the county that they were able to retrieve. And the service rate had been 25%. That rate has now doubled, but there's other states where the goal is 90%. There's a few other states where if it drops below 75%, then there's legislative action to bring everybody together to see why the service rate has dropped. And so that's something that Cook County has just, been very, very, very behind our counterparts across the country. The next high priority order is warrants. So the Cook County Court, Clerk of the Circuit Court shared with us that there's 72,000 outstanding warrants. So arrest warrants are issued from the court system. These are different from search warrants from the Chicago Police Department. An arrest warrant is issued from the court system. It could be for a failure to appear most often, or a violation of one of the programs you're ordered to. Those are transferred to the Cook County Sheriff to input into the LEAD system, which is the law enforcement database. That's a statewide database. And then to initiate that arrest. So all police agencies must make an arrest during a LEADS check. So that could be a traffic stop or another instance where an officer is running someone's identification through LEADS. So for many years, arrest warrants were the #1 cause of arrest for Chicago Police Department, with 7,551 reported in 2024 alone. So we know that the court warrants are causing a major, it's impacting the city's operations, its budget, public safety overall. But in terms of this work, there was an estimated 20% of all warrants were for domestic violence cases. And so that's like a number that's very probably twice, if not, double that, because you do this kind of check by lead charge, and oftentimes a domestic violence charge is a misdemeanor. And so when it's listed, it's not the lead charge. So what we do know is it's 1 in 5, and it could be much more than that. So what that means is when someone's walking into the courthouse, they get an order of protection. If they're lucky and get that 1 and 2 that gets the order served, someone violates that order and a violation of an order of protection warrant is issued, it's likely never being enforced. So really, we've just created this system with all of these different points for victims to have to go through, all of these hoops, all of these court dates, all of this paperwork, and the system itself is not functioning. Similarly, with firearm retrievals, an emergency order of protection is granted. The respondent's FOID card is temporarily revoked. If a weapon is not, weapons are not transferred to law enforcement at the time of service, there's really not a mechanism right now that's following up on these firearms. So there's been reported of, I think, upwards to 67,000 revoked FOID cards in the state of Illinois, and there's no effort to try and get the firearms out of that home. If you are in a home with a firearm, you are 10 times more likely to be a victim of murder. So that missing step is absolutely a public safety crisis. Karina's Law, which is a relatively new law to Illinois, allows for search warrants out of civil court to be ordered. And those are supposed to be transferred to local police to conduct the enforcement of those warrants and retrieve those firearms. Due to the warrants being from the civil court and then really local police having minimal access to civil court records, there's been some limitations. And so those numbers are just starting to uptick now. But tracking the orders is a paper-based process. And so there's been a lot of discrepancies in the reported numbers and challenges that a lot of the partners are trying to work through now. But there, if you want to believe the data that's been reported, there's just really been only a handful that have been enforced. So that brings us to our second executive recommendation, which is to build out an interagency data center. And so this would follow what's a really successful model from the high-intensity drug trafficking areas, the HIDA model, where it's a co-location space with a lot of different government entities with access to their respective systems. So this agency center would triage cases, look at how many orders of protection are outstanding, try and share relative information between the different agencies, but then really focus on how to improve safety for women, their children, and all of our communities by working together to improve the outcomes of all 3 of these high priority orders. The second recommendation out of the high priority committee is an independent data dashboard. So right now there's 4 different public dashboards from county agencies. There's one from the city. There's weekly reports issued by the Office of the Chief Judge. There's quarterly reports issued by the state's administrative office of the Illinois courts. But all of these reports are independent and sometimes they're conflicting. And so it would be really important, we feel it'd be really important to bring in an independent partner. This is a project that we want to get a public-private partnership and get some private funding together to focus on this. But the dashboard will track how many orders of protection are filed. So civil court data that's right now not shared anywhere. How many orders of protection are filed, how many warrants are filed, how many are enforced, how many orders of protection are served, and really track different points in the system that are impacting victims from the start of victimization to their path to survivorhood. The dashboard also will provide a level of accountability for current and future leaders because right now, as I mentioned before, there's not really a system. Everybody is independently elected. And there's nobody technically in charge. And so at least this data dashboard and the public information will be helpful to kind of track what everyone is doing and whether or not they've located the resources needed to properly serve victims. Because there's not a system, we came up with 6 points. So this is really a path that is probably most common. And so there's different initiation points. Some are in the community. It could be a hospital referral to the system, or it could be a 911 call. A lot of times there's multiple points of contact at point 1 and point 2 until somebody finally seeks an order of protection. And so these different points are where we think efforts should be focused going forward, because these are all drop-off points. As people say, this, there's cracks in the system. These are the cracks. As Sarah will share, we also feel the whole system is broken. It's not necessarily just the cracks. So, but these points really need further evaluation and deliberation. But these are the points that we really try to look at over the course of these 6 months. The absence of data makes some of the recommendations, a little difficult to just kind of to truly share how important some of the recommendations are to fixing the system. But as more data becomes available, we'll update these points of the system with actual data points, and we'll be able to then show, the absolute need for more collaboration at these points. Which brings us to our executive recommendation number 4, which would be to initiate a city cook charter. This would be an independent oversight committee that looks at the system as a whole. The system lacks a primary authority. We see this a lot of times with high priority cases when finger pointing in the news stories starts. That has not fixed anything. And as so many of the victims and surviving family members have shared with us, they just feel like nothing has changed since they lost their loved one or since they were harmed. And so this oversight committee would really bring a level of authority, or at least transparency, to the entire system and its partners, and then really look at enhanced coordination amongst all agencies. So the report identifies 15 different things that this committee will be focused on, but most importantly, it's improving transparency to those people that are seeking help in the system. So for example, there's no court recordings in a lot of the courtrooms that hear cases that involve the safety of women and their children. And so Sarah will share more about her case, but people's cases go on for a decade and they have multiple judges, and there's no court transcripts, there's no court recordings, there's no way to prove that discussions have already been had or determinations have already been made. Every time you get a new judge, your case basically resets, and you're re-victimized over and over and over by the system. So to improve transparency around and really look at just where we're deficient and compared to other jurisdictions, in talking to people across the country, we are just very, very, very behind. But this charter will also provide some level of assurance to some of the researchers and some of the philanthropic community that want to invest in this system, but currently there's not a coordinated system for them to invest in. And so this would bring more resources to the system, more oversight, more communication, and provide a structure where one currently does not exist. And so I'm going to have Sarah really quickly just kind of introduce herself and tell her story, because I could sit here all day, but until you hear from her, you won't truly understand the scope of what's happening.
Sarah Brown. I am a survivor. I actually share a child with my abuser. I have been in a open court domestic relations case for 9.5 years. I have had over 8 judges assigned to my case. Due to the lack of no reporters in the courtroom, the problem that I've definitely, which has been consistent, has had, once there's a new judge on your case, you have to retell your story. And so it depends on the judge and their diligence with, looking at the past history of the other individual. And in my case, he was my current abuser and actually was still abusing other women. And so one thing that actually really affected me and actually started this conversation with me reaching out to Cook County Commissioner Donna Miller is when my son actually had to witness his father beating his now or then girlfriend. This happened in 2024. And so as I was advocating to those multiple judges time and time again, with letting them know, hey, he had not completed his, class that was required, or he had another battery case in 2020, none of that mattered. And so when my son now, at the age of actually observing and being able to tell me what happened, I was broken because I thought the system was here to not only protect me, but at this point, to protect my son. Shortly thereafter, when that incident happened in 2024, my case was assigned to another judge. That judge, my case was up for a status call, and I remember that was the most horrific day of my life because he was actually in jail over the weekend. And the judge that was hearing the case, we were discussing, I was requesting for a modification of parenting time, because any parent that is aware that their child seeing such an abusive situation, I needed, could it be a modification of parenting time? And at that time, the judge said to me, stated to me, if there's issues with paying an attorney that was assigned to your case, I would rather give the custody to him. And beyond that, just the further detail of it is for me, there was no stop in parenting time. And the reason being, and at that time I did not know, now I know, the access that judges have to the databases that's supposed to be in place to look at the history of the person. And as a victim, I'm here trying to prove my point to a stranger. And so for me, in this process, and for many others, it's been many, many others throughout this duration of the task force, has said it's the same situation. And so for me, not having court reporters in a courtroom, being victimized with high court fees, and these court fees are related to appointed attorneys that a lot of times people don't understand, especially as we went through with the working groups, that these are private attorneys that are appointed by judges that, again, don't have a history of knowing signs of domestic violence or signs of a repeat abuser. And so for me, that is what my story is. This is what fueled my passion to stand up. And I do have an open case, but I chose this moment to say, hey, if my case don't ever get solved or closed, the next woman that goes through this situation does not have to go through it the way I went through it.
Thank you, Sarah. And so that brings us to our recommendation number 5, which is To create a victim-centered system, we want to primarily focus the next part of these efforts on the domestic relations court. So for those of you that are not aware, the civil court system is where an order of protection is filed and heard. In addition, there's a civil court system called domestic relations. It's oftentimes called family court, misunderstood as just divorce court in Cook County. But domestic relations court hears parentage cases, child custody. And a few years ago, the court system decided that when a victim came in to get an order of protection, if they had a current case or a need for a domestic relation case. So basically, if you had a child with your abuser, your case would be reassigned to that division. At that point, all services dropped off. So no advocacy, no access to legal advocates, no access to any sort of coordinated services. And so what we discovered using the data that was available is that almost 30% of all orders of protection have domestic relations cases. And so as Sarah mentioned, the lack of court recordings, transcripts, these cases go on for years and years. We have to be in court with your abuser. There's been forced mediation where someone was almost murdered by their ex-husband, one of the survivors that we work with, and then she was forced to sit across from him in a mediation. There's really just not any sort of domestic violence competency across, at least from the stories that we heard. And so what we've figured out is that this is a focus area, and it's also where someone's probably at the highest risk in the system. On the criminal case side, you have amazing state's attorneys, resources in that office. There's a lot more competency around the dangers and the risks. But in the domestic relations division, it just doesn't seem to be the same kind of focus. A lot of people are reporting some, horrible relationships and situations with some of the judges. But the most concerning part that we found out was that the court fees and costs for the services that were being assigned, not selected by the victim survivor, were costing tens and thousands of dollars. So we talked to some women who had literally living out of their car with their children who were being assigned a child psych order that costs $20,000, or a guardian ad litem that charges $400 an hour. And so the system is really, when you get to that, your choice is really to go back to your abuser, or to somehow figure out how to have all these fines and fees add up and figure out how to keep your head above water. It just absolutely makes no sense start to finish. And so the 6 points of the system are where we like to focus our further attention. But the domestic relations division also needs legislative reforms initiated in the fall, and for all sessions going forward. There's a lot to fix. And so with that, our next point that we focused on was also called Survivorhood. And our amazing partners did months and months of work. They've talked to a lot of survivors, some that are re-entering or that re-entered from custody themselves, many people that work in the system. And they just did an amazing job journey mapping, start to finish the system. And so with that, I'm going to pass over the next few minutes and slides over to Kelly and John.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for having us. We conducted this qualitative research to understand the journeys that survivors go through and to develop recommendations. If you move to the next slide, and the one after that, I can tell you that the Public Policy Lab, where I am representing, is a nonprofit that works with government agencies and departments to improve public services for low-income and marginalized communities. We actually recently wrapped up a project with the Michigan Supreme Court to improve their court forms for 1,100 court forms for self-representing litigants to better navigate the court system, and also to prepare the court system there in Michigan for digital first filing. I'm joined by Kelly.
And on the next slide, you'll see Kelly Costello from Impact Partners, I'm the founder. We lead innovation projects with government, nonprofits, private industry, and startups. And as a coach for the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation, I've worked with 12 different cities, most recently with Hamilton, Ontario, to redesign the residential development application process to address affordable housing, and then other projects in early childhood education and community engagement. If we go to the next slide, there's a quick sort of a synopsis of this engagement. We've interviewed 19 different people and visited both the Skokie and Markham courthouses. We spoke with judges, leads clerks, counselors, DV specialists, and interviewed advocates with nonprofits, subject matter experts with educational institutions, and survivors. You'll see at the bottom of this a journey map that we created to show the civil court process, primarily focusing on the order of protection. When we go to the next slide, today we really want to focus on 4 areas of opportunities and a recommendation: the digital court experience, care-centered communication strategy, a real-time navigator with wraparound services, and DV prevention programs. John will talk about a couple of these in detail.
Yeah, on the next slide, we know that virtual channels can increase access to courts. However, our site visits and conversations with survivors and court staff allowed us to identify a number of issues with the digital processes of filing court forms and attending virtual court. We observed how difficult it is to navigate the Cook County Court website to begin e-filing. We saw individuals be recommended to fill in paper forms rather than create online accounts that would ensure timely information of hearings, which is a major issue for those seeking justice. And we heard about survivors arriving at the court and sitting outside courtrooms on their phones because they were unaware that their cases were being held virtually on video conferencing. To address these challenges, we are proposing to redesign the digital court journey for self-representing litigants so that those who wish to file and attend court online can do so with the same ease and clarity as those who choose not to. The good news is that the key technology is already in place for e-filing and virtual court in Cook County. What we are proposing is to improve the processes and communications to ensure easy access to the existing digital infrastructure. Taken together, these changes will increase access, lessen administrative burden, and reduce case dismissals. On the next slide, survivors who are seeking court protection are often doing so as a last resort. They do so with a great deal of vulnerability and fear. And during our site visits, we observed in some cases court staff being unnecessarily combative and being transactional. Through interviews, we heard from survivors who were totally unclear of the processes they were entering into, and particularly their role in those processes. And we saw that the paperwork is daunting. Katie mentioned this earlier, but it is often unclear what to expect, and that's particularly true if survivors are filing multiple filings at one time, which is common. To address these challenges, we are proposing to conduct an analysis of existing DV court materials and communication flows, and to implement a care-centered communication strategy that would inform the tone of materials, include compassionate communication training for court staff, and consider courthouse design recommendations to reduce the emotional labor of accessing the courts. In particular, we are proposing the creation of what to expect guides for the differing common DV case pairings. By demystifying the court process and ensuring survivors are treated with care, we will increase the numbers of survivors who benefit from court protections.
For the next concept, the real-time navigator and wraparound services, we would observe that services can be inconsistently sort of applied. People have to prove eligibility or they don't know about services. And so this would really help people by developing additional court-involved and public resources explicitly made available for survivors seeking protection. It could include emergency housing that targets the 72 hours around the seeking of the order of protection, courthouse childcare services. Right now, you only have that available if you already have a court date, but when you're going to file, you also need childcare services, and then consistently available legal aid. On the next slide, our last concept really focuses on DV prevention program. It includes identifying and piloting proven programs aimed at reducing instances of domestic violence. One of our interviewees, who's a director of counseling, made this comment: "If I could do anything, I'd like to get a curriculum in schools so that children learn a little something more about the cycles of violence." So this concept could include educational programs about healthy relationships for school age or teenagers, or for adults that may be dealing with abusive children at home that have mental health issues. This could also bring about voluntary abuser intervention programs. Some already exist, but sort of increasing the availability of these that provide an opportunity for those who cause harm to seek help before violence escalates. And then the last, focusing on peer coaching and a support network that could reduce isolation and provide support throughout the end-to-end process of filing an order of protection. And then
On the final slide, as both Kelly and Katie mentioned, we conducted a decent series of research around qualitative research on and with the survivor journey. And so we're happy to share more of that, and particularly the journey map that we previewed up on the screen. And myself and Kelly will also be sticking around a little bit afterwards for any additional questions you might have. But any further contact, you can do so at those web email addresses, and we'd be happy to send you the materials that we have.
Okay, so just to kind of close, we want to thank everyone again. And then also a lot of what we mentioned today was court system or collaborative recommendations. We also just want to, kind of open this up for discussion. We do have some recommendations that are specific to Chicago included in the report. And so the main one being is that we need the Chicago partners to help us increase the number of protective orders served. So local law enforcement offices can do what's called a short form service. Chicago police are doing those, but they intercept probably much more, many more people than any of the other agencies in Cook County. And so we would love to, just look at that and give them the resources and training that they need. But then also just to continue a whole system approach, because we've heard from people who are afraid to register their kids at the Chicago parks because they're afraid that the abuser will come and pick up their kids. Or we've heard, about the need for more programming and training in the schools. And so we want to look going forward at some more bigger picture partnerships with City of Chicago, and really how we can start to create a culture where as we rebuild the system for victims to come and get the services and just the care that they deserve, that we're also improving the understanding in communities of what's going on. When we came here in November, I put up a map of the city of Chicago with the points of domestic relations, violent crimes, and it was the entire city of Chicago. And so we just want to make sure that every alderman and alderperson knows that we're here as a resource, and that every community is impacted. And going forward, we really like to have hear from all of you and figure out how we can partner to better serve the survivors in your community. With that, I'm going to give this over to Carmen Navarro.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to close by saying you've obviously seen all the work that went into this. You heard earlier that this year alone, in just the last 6 months, the 53% decrease. And you ask, what has changed in the 6 months? Well, we're going to tell you what's been done differently over the past few decades is that this was strictly a victim-led approach. We can't say that enough. Today, we have presented a roadmap built directly from lived experiences. This report demands sweeping reform, but let me be clear, transparency is not a threat to our legal system. It is a requirement for public trust. Our courts must answer to the people they are built to protect. We're delivering the exact resources, protections, and services that every single citizen should rightfully expect when they are in crisis. To the survivors who guided us, thank you for your courage. To the public, we promise you a system that answers your need with dignity, clarity, and speed. The era of talking is over, and the era of accountable action hopefully begins today. Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Katie, and Sarah and Carmen and the other partners for the information from this report. And I just wanted to thank Alderwoman Tavares for leading this for City Council. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing us to be here today. And thank you for all the City Council members who voted unanimously for this, this initiative to go forward. And hearing from so many of them and own personal testimonies also just highlights the need for this initiative and the first collaboration between Cook County as well as the city of Chicago. And I can't be more proud of the information that we've gathered from this report. As you can see, it's very detailed. There's multiple at the end of, just to have a report and say, here, we're filing this report. This lets us know the areas that we have work to do in, what that work can look like, and how many people actually want to work together to get that report. So Alderwoman Tavares has been such an amazing leader and just focused on what this looks like to come together, work together. And we also have my commitment that as I move forward and look at the Violence Against Women Act on the federal level, that we can get resources, not only here in the city of Chicago, but in Cook County and across the country, because this is not an isolated issue just here in our area. But I think that we have so many experts now that will be able to come and testify and say what it looks like and how the work has been led by victims, unfortunately, re-traumatizing many of those stories over and over again. So we appreciate them from the bottom of our hearts for sharing these deeply personal issues with us, but we couldn't have gotten here without that information. And it's been so telling for each of the different departments, whether it be at the city or at the county level, to hear that this is what the result of our work is doing. Whether they think they're putting things in place or not putting things in place, we have to be absolutely sure to protect not only the women who are victims, the children who are victims, but also put things in place so that we can move forward to have higher transparency and accountability. So thank you. It's been great being your partner, and we're not done yet.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And I certainly appreciate your leadership on this issue. And it just highlights the fact that we really need to do a better job of collaborating with our two government agencies. We share the same building, but we share responsibilities at a much more significant level. And I can think of few issues that highlight that need like this issue does. We can't do it alone. Each government on its own could not solve this massive problem. There's jurisdictional barriers as well, but we have to do a better job collaborating and working together as one of the recommendations to form a charter that would directly address that. I think that's essential, and I think this issue highlights the need to move forward on that. So your presence here today is both symbolic and significant, that I hope it will signal a new dawn of cooperation between city and county government so we can begin to solve some of these problems. Questions from committee members? Alderman Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Want to first express my appreciation to Alderwoman Tabares, to Commissioner Miller for your leadership on this. We have seen in the 47th Ward in recent years these problems felt in a very acute way. Just a few weeks ago, in fact, tragically, there was a neighbor who was shot and killed by his neighbor's abuser, who came to her property despite there being an order of protection that was issued. We're still looking to figure out the details. My understanding was that order had not been served on the offender who shot and killed this neighbor, but it was just really highlighting the need to, piggybacking on a previous hearing that Alderwoman Tabar's led on, that we figure out how to serve these more quickly, more effectively. We don't have gun violence affect our community in the 47th Ward in the same ways that some of my colleagues' wards are affected, but this is one that really hits close to home in multiple ways. And some of the recommendations here, I think, will be very helpful once they are instituted to help prevent tragedies like this from happening again. So thank you to the two of you and to the folks in the box and the other leaders who aren't here today, but still provided invaluable help. One question I had was around this proposal around a single data center or data sharing. How can we make sure that we're not just putting that in place so that both CPD, the sheriff's office, and anyone else in law enforcement have access to it, but they have access to it in a timely way, they have the right resources, so that, for example, we can serve these orders of protection as quickly as possible?
Thank you. That is a great question. And so what the partnership that it's kind of modeled off of right now does these for high intensity drug trafficking. So the drug trafficking cases, and has resounding success. And so what it is it's a co-location model. But just to kind of explain this under like just a term or kind of like the pathway for a victim in Chicago and Cook County is there's a civil order. And even the criminal system judges don't always check that and vice versa. So even just in Cook County, there's access is limited to the across the court systems. Access to the civil court system is limited by state law and policy to local law enforcement. So say, for example, Chicago Police Department cannot see the same thing that the Cook County Sheriff can because the sheriff is the law enforcement entity for the court system. This impacts so many different cases. For example, like orders of protection, unless they're served, are not public record. And so what we found was some of the women that were either killed or missing had 5 prior orders of protection, and the Chicago police cannot see that, at least in a really easy way. I think a couple people might now have access and they don't even know what they're looking at. They have to go through every single case to try and find what they're looking for. So really just to have people who are experts in their own system in one place, and then to bring in outside experts to come in and say, okay, there's lethality assessments, there's high-risk teams, there's all different models across the country that have been doing this really for decades. But we've never had that ability to implement a research-based model because we don't have the data and we don't have the collaboration. And so really what we'd like to look at is say, how do we improve orders of protection being served across the system? Right now, you could go to a criminal case today, have an active order of protection against you, and no one on the criminal side will serve it to you because they don't know. So really, how do we improve communication is step one, but then really this is more the remedy of how do we get everybody together right now and at least start trying to triage these cases, especially those that are high risk. Someone might be charged with attempted murder. We know a warrant was issued this morning. This team should be activated and try to figure out in the respective systems, what's the best address? Or say the orders that cannot go into the system, the lead system, because they're missing a birth date. The Secretary of State has the birth dates. The Cook County Clerk's Office has the birth dates. So it's just trying to kind of look at some of the impediments to getting the care and the services that women need and try to fix the system through this collaboration. So I hope that answered your question. It's kind of the different focal points have really different initiatives under each of them. The orders of protection would be one kind of component. The warrants would be another. And then the third would be the firearm retrievals, which we are in desperate need of collaboration across the country. FROs, firearm restraining orders, they're high risk orders. It's a family can initiate that if they're worried about a loved one. We only have a handful every year compared to thousands in other jurisdictions that are filed. So really it's fixing the system, and then we'll be able to present it to the public as something that functions and actually works. But right now there's just there's so little coordination that even filing one, it might never get served. They might never get the guns. And so it's really kind of twofold, fixing the system and then bringing in a data-driven, research-based approach.
That's very helpful. One follow-up question to that is, do you anticipate that the county would be better served than the city to lead on both the, I guess, design of that system as well as the funding of any work associated with it?
Truly, I mean, I think what we'd like to include is eventually local law enforcement as well. As Commissioner Miller stated, this is something we know is happening across Cook County. So incorporating all local law enforcement would be the ultimate goal. But the city of Chicago has a lot of information through their 911 center, through Chicago Fire, through Chicago Police. And so they'd be a really critical partner because just to kind of get creative and start to look at this as a system, there's a lot of data points that are missing right now that we need to collect just to even understand the scope.
That's helpful because I know it's both a benefit and a disadvantage to have something that spans multiple jurisdictions, multiple levels of government. On the one hand, it mirrors the ways in which we need them collaborating across jurisdictions, but also can lead to situations where maybe there's a lack of clarity on who's going to contribute what percentage of funding, who's going to be running point on certain aspects of both the creation and implementation. So I think that's something that we as government leaders at both the county and the city level can think through so that we don't see unintentional delay because there's no one stepping up to run point on that. The only other thing is that I would share is a comment, not a question, which is the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center is a great example of collaboration at not just the city and county level, but also the state level. So having people on site who are detectives from CPD, who are attorneys from the state's attorney's office, prosecutors, and then people from DCFS at the state level to help provide wraparound services to children who have witnessed or otherwise experienced truly terrific, horrific trauma. I think that works really well. And I think that as some of the suggestions talk about with regard to adult survivors, I think that CCAC would be a good model to look to, in particular their Can Hope proposal, as we expand the sorts of services that some of the most vulnerable and underserved members of our community need help with. So would just flag that for folks. Thank you again to my two colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Martin. Further questions, Alderwoman? You'll be next, okay? Alderwoman Silverstein, followed by Alderman Chico.
Thank you. And I also just have a comment, or actually I want to say thank you to my colleague, Alderwoman Tabarez and Commissioner Miller for really spearheading this task force. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. And thank you for presenting to us and letting us know everything that's involved. And I also just want to say one thing to Sarah. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being here today and sharing your horrible experience, years-long horrible experience. And, you know, we need women to stick together, to stand up, and know that as much as we can, we have your back. So thank you.
Alderman Chico, as always, we appreciate your perspective as the only member of this committee who is a sworn law enforcement personnel.
Thank you, Chair. And I too want to thank the leadership of Alderwoman Tabarez and Commissioner Miller. As somebody who is in the system, as a Chicago police officer, one of the routine calls we went to on a day-to-day basis were domestic violence calls. And there were some addresses we went to multiple times a day and multiple times a week. And after most shifts, I would reflect on what I saw, the incident, and collect my thoughts about it. And after seeing this robust and thorough presentation, a lot of my questions and a lot of the things I pondered on were kind of addressed there. I'm so happy to see that. And to Alderman Martin's point, and I think he hit it right on the head, when we left those situations, I thought about the children and the impact that it must have on them as they were going through this traumatic experience. So I'm so glad to see the efforts being led in addressing how we're going to work with the children and what they've gone through in these situations, because it's so very important, especially for our young women who see that and are traumatized by that. So I just want to thank everybody here in providing the leadership. And I could tell you for certain we are on the right path. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alderman Chico. Alderman Vasquez.
Thank you, Chairman. Also want to thank Alderwoman Taveras and Commissioner Miller for their work and the conversation. In the 40th Ward, we've had Jaden Perkins, whose life was lost because of the court system, and sometimes even seeing some of the judges who aren't taking some of the complaints seriously or the orders of protection with the severity they need to be seen. It actually led us to the point where we had to partner up with other elected officials to move a judge from being in the domestic violence to going to traffic. And I think conversations related to what training looks like for the judges and where they start should be part of the equation. So I really am grateful for a lot of the work and the reporting shared here. I also appreciate your courage in speaking out, but I think we know how many people don't feel comfortable speaking out at all because the system isn't strong enough to make them feel protected if they actually want to file the complaints or actually take it to the next step, as well as the services needed to intervene on the front end to not even let it get that far. I think there's a number of us who've grown up in communities where what could easily be interpreted as domestic violence is referred to as not sparing the rod. And I think that we need a more fulsome conversation and context so people feel comfortable enough to have these conversations in the open so that they know where they can go and feel protected in doing so. I think that the questions I have are kind of general. So in some regard, just kind of curious what any conversations that have happened with Chief Judge Beach as far as taking on some of this, because I think it was a little bit of a challenge with the prior leadership. So I don't know if anyone could share what those conversations have looked like.
Sure. So I met with the chief judge, I think, on his second day. So we definitely elevated this as quickly as possible. The commissioners have also been meeting with him as well, just about the lack of transparency, the issues. He has a couple working groups right now that I know are focused on different areas in the court. Once again, it's not transparent because it's, so I don't really know much about the findings or even who's on it to really share, but I'm sure they are focused on this. There's a lot of people that do really truly care. There's also people that are advocates for the system. And those are the people that, you just really need to figure out a way around. And I think by looking at it together and to kind of, create some legislation that just mandates some things that are long overdue, that will be a great, kind of pushing the people that have just been institutionalized in the system. And this is the way things are, kind of push them in the right direction. Chief Judge Beach is a really great guy. He's committed to data and transparency. He just is, it's going to be a slow process.
Yep.
And he also oversees an office with 300 judges, I think 200 of which are independently elected. So it's just something that it's in the report about judicial inquiry boards that's run by the state and how little the turnaround is for any kind of investigations on judges. And so that's something that the charter needs to would look at. There's also attorneys that are assigned, like say in Sarah's case, she's had different GALs assigned that are assigned by the judges, and the judges tell someone like Sarah how much they need to be paid. They're supposed to interview the children and decide what's best for the children. They're lawyers, not social workers, not anybody else. And there's no transparency on how they're identified or what their background is, or there's been some removed from even being arrested themselves. I think one was, a horrible case. So there's just there's a lot of questions about that need answers. About all the different steps in the court system. And I do believe that he's committed to helping these efforts as we proceed.
No, thank you. I think that was kind of my sense too. And I think when you have new leadership, there's definitely opportunities to improve and to take on some of these initiatives on. And I think you're being very polite. I think as far as pushing people in the right direction, sometimes the right direction is out. if they're not willing to make the changes necessary to make sure people are protected in situations like this. And so I think that and I imagine a chief judge coming in with so many things to take on, that there is a really good first step of just providing as much transparency as possible in a way that allows us to improve systems. I think it is always a good thing. The second question, I'll say this, for me, we see like agencies where we want to make improvements, or sometimes it's just having a baseline of reporting mechanisms quarterly and just looking like, how are we doing? Have we improved? That I think just kind of helps any system in general. My next question, and part of my ignorance, because I saw the charter conversation and wanted to know if there were other examples of where the city and the county has kind of had these kind of partnerships and intergovernmental ones, because I can imagine other opportunities. Like, right now we're talking about the protecting renters ordinance, which is a completely separate matter, but the county does have some of the data we'd be looking for in like a rental registry, so to speak. And so I'm just curious as to what precedent there might be, or examples of really good working intergovernmental partnerships that we might be able to model after when we look at something like this.
I will just tell you that we kind of started with, this is the first of its kind from what we've heard. And there was, something years ago that looked at the opioid epidemic at the time, some conversations, but nothing to this magnitude, nothing that's brought in the state as well. So we're hoping that this is kind of an impetus for a lot of other conversations. I will just to your point is, we would love to also get eviction data, because we know that women are coming in and get orders of protection, and then the same system is evicting them 90 days later. So there's so many different points in the system that we'll be adding along the way. The good news is the county has a $55 million new record management system. We just need to get that functional and get that producing the information that it needs. I know the chief judge will approve these requests until we get this legislation changes where, it's mandated, where especially requests from other bodies like city council are prioritized, and everybody gets the information they need. And then we could start creating blueprints going forward that are evidence-based and database instead of, conjecture or however we're doing it right now.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not working.
Absolutely. And I'm confident that our colleagues on the city council side have the will to really make a partnership work. So I think whatever you all have as recommendations and sometimes challenges to us to kind of rise up to the occasion and make sure we're doing everything at our part of city council, please share those with us and let us know, because it's not going to get approved but for taking these first steps. And so it is tremendous work that we're all appreciative and want to make sure we can help continue the momentum and lead to more progress. So thank you very much. And thank you again, Commissioner, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Vasquez. Alderman Tabarez to close, but first, Commissioner Miller had to add something to the response.
Yes, I just wanted to add. So thank you for, the question. So I've met with Chief Judge Beach many times, and even prior to him being elected, I said, when you if you were to become the chief judge, this is what we're going to be talking about. So there's been multiple meetings about the issue of transparency and what you touched on about, how do we remove judges if that needs to be the case? Unfortunately, the system that Katie outlined doesn't lend itself for that. So that's a legislative issue that might be able to be changed in Springfield on some level. So that is one of the other points that we're looking at. We have many of the victims who came to our different task force have filed these grievances. And so what I wanted to do was compile the data of who's filed grievances, and nothing happened from it. So those are the other issues that we've made Chief Judge Beach very aware of. He has been very accommodating. He's also been very open to the transparency of data as much as he can provide. We have to get input from several different organizations from the county side, and that's where we run into some stumbling blocks. And so I think that having this report, having the pressure from two different agencies, from the city and the county, and saying we are adamantly requesting and need this data so we can move forward with getting finalization of not only the report, but we can't have Cook County, and I always say this all the time, like Cook County is half of Chicago. Well, the other half, we can't have nothing. We can't have no information about. So that's where we're at right now. We don't have that other 50% of information. So we need to get it. And by any means that we have to get it, we have to have that. So he can have the information to compile for these reports. So we're definitely moving those steps along the way. And now it's documented in this report.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is encouraging. Alderman Tabarez to close.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to be very brief. I just want to close out and say that 6 months ago, we came together because the crisis was undeniable. Domestic violence was claiming too many lives, and we created this first of its kind task force, public safety and health task force, and really brought the city and the Cook County together. And I want to thank all the survivors, especially Sarah Brown, who is with us today, for her courageous voice. Thank you. I also want to recognize all the survivors, the family of survivors who stood with us at the press conference, who gave public comment, who came to all the meetings. I want to thank them, and I want to let them know that we're not going to stop until the system works for them. We're not going to stop. I also want to thank all of my colleagues in the city council who supported this and voted for it. It was voted on very unanimously. I want to thank them for all their support, and especially you, Chairman Hopkins, for all of your support as well, for giving this hearing, this resolution to be in your committee, and as well as your staff, very helpful staff. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to my co-chair, Cook County Commissioner of the Task Force, Donna Miller, for carrying this on the county side. They'll be putting their recommendations next Wednesday at the county level. Today we're hearing on the city side. But I want to acknowledge and recognize all of the city agencies who are here, and I want to recognize them who are in the box. Daniel Castañeda with the Department of Family and Support Services. He's the Deputy Commissioner for Gender-Based Violence and Human Services. I want to recognize also Christopher Soderlin with the Chicago Fire Department. Thank you. As well as we have Jackie Silva, who's the policy analyst with the OEMC. Thank you for being here. As well as from the Chicago Police Department, we have Detective Alfredo Vivas Jr. and Officer Mariana Martinez. They have been very engaged throughout this whole process, attending the working group meetings, the executive meetings at the county building, been very engaged, very present, listening as we talk about all of this. So I want to thank them for being there and hearing this out and being part of this task force. And then finally, I just want to thank Katie Dunn and Carmen Navarro-Jacone. We just did this 6 months, but these two ladies have been working on this for years, and they dedicated their professional lives tackling this issue. So I want to recognize their hard work on this as well. So, and I want to thank also the experts here, Kelly Costello, as well as John Buckley, who are here too. Thank you for coming. Today we wrapped up phase 1 of the task force, which lays out clear recommendations centered on improving collaboration between the city and the county, which is very critical to improving public safety. This report is not the end. This is not the end of the task force. This is progress. We're just getting started. And let's move these recommendations forward with the same urgency and unity that created this task force 6 months ago. I'm looking forward to continuing working on phase 2 of the task force, which will begin this fall, and that's going to expand the collaboration by including leaders in the Illinois state legislature. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I too want to thank Ms. Dunn in particular. I recognize that none of this would have happened without your persistence and your diligence and your hard work. And we are only just beginning. And of course, to your team especially, and to everyone who testified here today, as my colleague Alderman Vasquez pointed out, the political will is already there. Typically, when we have an issue before this committee, that's our challenge, is to generate the support and to get everybody on the same page. That's already done. Just informally discussing the 5 recommendations in the past few days, I haven't heard anyone who hesitated to recognize the validity of it, the justification for it, and signs on right away. So we are as unanimous as we can be as a political body. We checked that box already. The next step, of course, is overcoming the inertia that could be our obstacle to continued progress. So I pledge to you, Ms. Dunn, and my colleagues on this committee, you have the full support of this committee and all the resources that we have to ensure that the progress continues to be gained. And not to say that there aren't obstacles out there. We know there are. This won't be easy. In fact, when you think about the challenges that we're talking about, with the jurisdictional barriers that have traditionally been, an obstacle to reform, we have to push back as hard as we can on that and not let that stop us from making the necessary progress. Literally, lives are at stake, and we all know it. So thank you again, Commissioner Miller and Alderman Tabarez, for initiating this. We are on your team, we are on your side, and we look forward to making continued progress. And with that, a motion to adjourn by Alderman Lopez, motion to adjourn. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.